There is a strange kind of grief that happens when someone dies after you already had to grieve them while they were alive. And if you've ever lost a parent you were estranged from, distant from, unsafe with, or unable to have a relationship with, you may know exactly what I mean. Because this grief does not always feel clean. It does not always look the way that people expect grief to look. You might not only be grieving the person who died, you might also be grieving a relationship that never felt safe, or a repair that never came, an apology you never received, a version of them that you kept hoping might appear someday, a version of yourself who waited quietly for something to change. And then death comes along and closes a door that may have already been closed in practical terms, but not necessarily inside of you. That is part of why this can feel so disorienting. Both my dad and stepfather died while I was estranged from them, and that I found in both instances the grief can be layered. There can be sadness and relief and anger and guilt, numbness, confusion, or even a strange sense of nothingness. And at times, all of those things move through my body in the same hour. And I want to say this clearly so it's not confused. Mixed emotions do not mean that you're grieving wrong. Relief does not cancel grief. Anger does not cancel love. Numbness does not mean that it didn't matter. And grief does not mean that the estrangement was a mistake. Sometimes grief simply means that there was something here that mattered. And maybe that was the relationship that mattered. Maybe the absence mattered. Maybe the child in you who wanted something different still matters. And from a nervous system perspective, estranged grief can be especially complicated because the body looks for completion or closure. It wants to know, is this over? Am I safe now? Did I do the right thing? Was there something else I should have done? Can I finally stop waiting? Can I finally stop wondering if they ever cared about me? But estrangement does not give us clean endings. If you're like me, there may have been no final conversation, no repair, no shared understanding, no moment where we all sat down together and told the truth, no clear place to put the love, the anger, or the disappointment. So my nervous system just kept looping. It kept going back through old memories, old arguments, old possibilities, and old fantasies of who they might have become. And it searched for a version of the story that would make it all make sense. But this is where people can get really hard on themselves if they're not careful. They can think, well, why am I grieving? I'm the one who chose distance. Or why do I feel relieved? What does that even say about me? Or why am I sad when they're the ones who hurt me? Or why do I still want something from someone who could never give it to me in the first place? But the body doesn't exactly grieve logically. It grieves relationally. It grieves the bond, the rupture, the absence, the hope, the harm, the fantasy, and the finality. It's grieving the person and the possibility. I was grieving my dad and the idea of what a father-daughter relationship could be. And so this is why this kind of grief can feel like losing someone twice. First, you lose them in the relationship. And then when they die, you lose the potential for any relationship to be something else. And even if you knew that reconciliation was unlikely, even if you knew that the distance was necessary, even if you made peace with making the ultimate boundary, there can still be a part of you that feels the finality of death and realizes that no new version of this story gets to exist in the world. And that realization can hit hard in the chest. It can cause the throat to go tight, or the belly to feel hollow, or the hands to feel restless, or the mind to feel foggy. Or you might even feel completely numb. And none of these responses are wrong. They're all information. And this is why, for estranged grief, I don't think the first question is, how do I get closure? Because sometimes closure is just too clean of a word for something that's this complicated. Sometimes the more honest question is, how do I help my body understand that I'm here now in a life I built while still allowing an unfinished story to be unfinished? Because some grief doesn't resolve through explanation. Some grief softens while making contact with the present moment, or contact with the ground, or contact with your breath, or contact with the part of you that survived the relationship, survived the estrangement, and is now surviving the death too. Because this isn't about forcing forgiveness. It's not about making the relationship seem better than it was. It's not about pretending the good outweighed the harm or that the harm erased every complicated moment of love. It's about letting the truth be whole enough to hold the contradictions. So maybe they hurt you and you miss what they never became. Maybe you need a distance and you still feel sad. Maybe you are relieved and heartbroken. Maybe you feel nothing right now because your body has not decided whether it's safe to feel yet. None of these are wrong. When grief is ambiguous, disenfranchised, or complicated by estrangement, one of the most healing things that we can offer ourselves is recognition. Not explanation, but recognition that something happened, that it was complicated, and that it affected us. So you might repeat after me. I am allowed to grieve what I lost. I am allowed to grieve what I never had. I am allowed to feel relief without shame. I am allowed to feel sadness without making the past seem safer than it was. I am allowed to let this story be unfinished and still take care of myself. So if you are grieving a parent you were estranged from, I hope you walk away from this video knowing this. You do not have to perform grief for other people's comfort. You do not have to make your relationship understandable to everyone else before your grief is considered valid. You do not have to forgive on anyone else's timeline. You do not have to feel only one thing. And you don't have to turn the person who died into a sinner or a saint just because death makes people uncomfortable with complexity. You are allowed to tell the truth. You are allowed to let the story be complicated. And you are allowed to take care of the part of you that is grieving the parent, the absence, the hope, the harm, the possibility, and the child within you who wanted more. You are allowed to grieve what happened to you, and you are allowed to grieve what never happened. Because all of that is grief, and all of it is just as real as anything else.